Welcome, traveler. Let the noise of your age fall away. Let the sharp electric glow of your world soften and dim. You are drifting now on a cool, quiet current, pulling away from the shores of the known. Feel a change in the air, a deep, penetrating chill, carrying the ancient scents of damp stone, of wood smoke, of beeswax, and of old, forgotten paper. You open your eyes and you are no longer in your room. You are standing in the heart of a scholar's study, a small, timber-framed room huddled against the immense, silent darkness of a medieval night. A single candle sputters on a cluttered oak desk, its flame a tiny defiant star against the gloom. The low-beamed ceiling seems to press down heavy with the weight of centuries. The walls are a fortress of books, their leather spines cracked and faded their pages, holding the accumulated wisdom and folly of generations. Anatomical charts depicting the four humors hang beside complex astrological maps. Jars of medicinal herbs sit next to forbidden treatises on the nature of spirits. This is a room that exists on the dangerous frontier between science and superstition. Your gaze is drawn to the man at the desk. He is old, his face a landscape of fine lines etched by long nights of study and longer nights of worry. He is dressed in the dark, simple robes of a physician, but it is his eyes that hold your attention. They are the eyes of a man who has seen too much weary yet sharp, holding both a doctor's compassion and a logician's profound frustration. He holds a heavy leather-bound book, his finger tracing a line of Latin text, and his expression is one of deep intellectual disgust. The book is the Malleus Maleficarum, the Hammer of Witches. He lets out a slow, weary sigh, a sound that seems to carry all the sorrow of his era. He closes the book with a soft, final thud, as if entombing the madness within its pages. Then he looks up, and his gaze seems to pass through the centuries, through the very fabric of your dream, and finds you standing there in the shadows. He does not seem startled. He seems instead to have been expecting you. "Ah," he says, and his voice is like the dry rustle of old parchment. "A visitor. From a time with less vigorous superstitions, I presume, or perhaps a time whose superstitions are merely better disguised." He gestures to the chair opposite him, a silent invitation. "You have come to see the great fever that swept our continent, the one they call the Burning Times. Do not look for its cause in the stars or in the machinations of the devil. I have spent a lifetime studying this affliction, and I can tell you with certainty its source is not in hell. It is here," he says, tapping his own temple with a long, slender finger. "It is a sickness of the mind, a plague of certainty." He leans forward, the candlelight carving deep shadows into his face. "History will tell you of the victims. The chronicles will list the names of the accused. But I can offer you something more practical. A lesson in survival. I have watched this disease unfold, I have dissected its logic, and I have prescribed cures that no one would listen to. So since you have traveled so far, allow me to be your guide. I will not teach you of kings and dates. I will teach you of symptoms of diagnosis and of the desperate, often futile treatments for this particular madness." A faint, deeply ironic smile touches his lips. "Consider this my private lecture on how to survive a sickness of the soul. But first, a disclaimer." He raises a finger, his tone shifting to that of a lecturer addressing a new class. "The advice that follows is for educational and philosophical purposes only. Attempting to actually survive a medieval witch hunt is not recommended, as survival rates are, to put it mildly, statistically insignificant. Side effects of being accused may include but are not limited to social ostracism, the confiscation of all worldly goods, a catastrophic decline in personal hygiene, and a terminal allergy to fire." He lets the dark joke hang in the air for a moment. "Now then," he says, his voice once again becoming a low, intimate murmur. "Let us begin. Our first lesson concerns the most dangerous affliction of all in these dark times, the malady of being noticed. This is sleep among titans, and you, dear listener, are exactly where you're meant to be. If your eyes are still open, welcome. If they're starting to close, that's perfect too. The story will wait. It always has. And if this night brings you calm, I'd love to know. Leave a whisper in the comments, or simply subscribe, leave a lantern lit so the next dream can find you. The faint sour smell of the Malleus Maleficarum seems to fade as Weyer pushes the book aside, the scraping of its leather cover on the oak desk, a sound of final, weary dismissal. He turns his full attention to you, his eyes holding the quiet intensity of a lecturer about to impart a difficult but essential truth. The candlelight flickers, casting his face in a shifting relief of shadow and light. So he begins, his voice a low, calm murmur that cuts through the silence of his study. Our first lesson. Before we can discuss the treatment, we must first diagnose the risk factors. What is it that makes a soul susceptible to this particular fever? What are the telltale signs that mark one for accusation? You might think it is malice or blasphemy, or some overt act of diabolism. You would be wrong. The most dangerous symptom of all, my friend, is competence. He gestures for you to close your eyes, to leave the safety of his cluttered study and travel with him in your mind. Come with me, he urges. Let us leave the world of books and visit the world of practice. We will walk the muddy, unlit lanes of this town, past the slumbering homes of the tailors and the blacksmiths, to a small, humble hut on the very edge of the village. It is a place the respectable folk tend to avoid unless, of course, they are in desperate need. The scene materializes around you, woven from his words and the power of your own imagination. You can smell the damp thatch of the roof, the sharp, clean scent of lavender and chamomile hanging in dry bunches from the low rafters. The hut is poor, but it is meticulously clean. A simple fire glows in the hearth, and a sleeping dog twitches by the embers. This is the home of the village midwife, a woman we shall call Goodwife Agnes. She is old, her back bent from a lifetime of stooping over birthing beds, her hands gnarled and stained with the juices of 100 different herbs. But her eyes, when she looks up from the poultice she is grinding with a stone pestle, are clear, intelligent, and calm. She is a woman who has seen more of the raw, brutal reality of life and death than any priest in his pulpit or any magistrate on his bench. Look at her. Weyer's voice guides you, a clinical but compassionate whisper in your mind. She is by any rational measure a healer. Her knowledge is not learned from the lofty texts of Avicenna or Galen. It is a practical wisdom passed down from her mother and her mother before her. It is a knowledge born of the earth itself, of long observation, of trial and error. She knows that willow bark will ease a fever. She knows that a tincture of foxglove can steady a fluttering heart. She knows how to turn a baby in the womb with a skill and patience that most university-trained physicians, myself included, can only envy. He pauses, letting you observe the quiet, confident work of her hands. And that, he says, his voice heavy with a terrible irony, is precisely what makes her so dangerous. Her success is the most damning evidence against her. When the learned doctor, with all his expensive Latin phrases and his theories of the four humors, fails to save a child from a fever, it is God's will. But when Goodwife Agnes succeeds with a simple herbal tea, it cannot be skill. It cannot be wisdom. It must therefore be magic. It must be a pact with a darker power. You watch as a young mother enters the hut, her face pale with worry, carrying a child burning with fever. Goodwife Agnes does not speak of demons or of sin. She speaks in a low, calming voice. She examines the child with a gentle, practiced touch. She prepares a drink. It is a simple human act of care. Her greatest liability, Weyer continues, is the birthing bed. That is the stage upon which her fate is most often decided. The birthing room is a place of blood, of pain, of life balanced on the edge of a knife. When all goes well, she is a vessel of God's miracle. But when things go wrong, as they so often do in this world, when a child is stillborn or is born with some sad defect of the body or mind, who is to blame? It is a far greater comfort for a grieving family to blame a curse from the attending midwife than to confront the terrifying random cruelty of nature or the possibility of God's own mysterious, unyielding will. His voice hardens with a physician's frustration. They do not see the twisted cord. They do not see the mother's exhaustion or the sickness in her blood. They see only a witch's malice. Every child she saves is a silent victory soon forgotten. But every child she loses is a public failure, a piece of evidence to be stored away, a stone to be used against her when the time is right. The scene in the hut fades, and you are back in the quiet intimacy of Weyer's study. He is looking at you, his eyes filled with a deep, pragmatic sorrow. So what is my prescription for this good woman? What advice could I offer her as a physician to ensure her continued health and safety? It is a terrible and absurd thing to say, but it is the only truth that applies in this sick world. She must become a worse midwife. The cynicism in his voice is as sharp as a surgeon's scalpel. Yes. She should let a few more of her remedies fail. When she prepares a poultice, she should make a great show of praying over it, for the performance of piety is far more valued than the efficacy of the herbs. If a patient recovers after her care, she must weep with gratitude and declare it a miracle from the Virgin Mary, and she must be sure to look just as surprised and undeserving as everyone else. Her competence is a threat. Her knowledge is a liability. Her only true safety lies in appearing to be as helpless and as dependent on divine intervention as everyone else in the village. He sighs the sound of a rational man forced to navigate an irrational world. So that is the first rule of survival, my friend. If you possess a skill, you must attribute it to God. If you have knowledge, you must claim it came from a holy dream. You must wrap your competence in a thick cloak of humility and luck, for a knowledgeable woman is a suspicion, but a lucky woman is merely blessed. It is a dangerous and exhausting performance, but it is the only one that will keep you from the fire. The imagined scent of herbs in the midwife's hut fades, and you are once again in the quiet candlelit space of Johann Weyer's study. The first lesson hangs in the air between you, a heavy and unsettling truth in a world governed by fear. Competence is a crime that requires the disguise of piety. He lets the thoughts settle like sediment in a medicinal tincture before he prepares you for the next diagnosis. So knowledge is a danger, he says, his voice a low, steady murmur, and success is a liability. But there is another condition that marks one for this terrible sickness, a far more common affliction that requires no special skill or learning. It is the simple, quiet malady of being alone. Once more, he invites you to follow him into the landscape of his memory. You leave the competent midwife behind and drift through the cold night to another part of the village. This house is different. It is smaller, more neglected. The path leading to it is overgrown with weeds, and a shutter hangs from a single rusty hinge, knocking softly against the wall in the wind. The house itself seems to sigh with a deep structural loneliness. We are now at the home of a woman named Johann Weyer explains. Her husband died of the winter fever 2 years past. Her children are grown and gone. She is old, she is poor, and she is alone. These are the three conditions that in the eyes of this community create a perfect breeding ground for demonic influence. You peer with him through a grimy window pane into a sparse single room. Elsbeth sits by a weak fire, her hands moving slowly, mending a tattered piece of cloth. She is muttering to herself, her voice a soft, continuous stream of whispers. In the corner, a sleek black cat watches her with luminous green eyes. To a modern eye, it is a simple portrait of lonely old age. To the eyes of her neighbors, it is a scene pregnant with sinister meaning. In a village, Weyer says, his voice taking on the analytical tone of a physician observing a patient, your safety is not found in your innocence, but in your connections. A husband, a son, a web of neighbors who owe you favors, these are your fortress against accusation. They are the ones who will speak for your character, who will remind the accusers that you are one of them. Elsbeth has no such fortress. She is a social island, and an island is easily conquered. Listen to her, he urges. She is whispering to herself. The priest, should he hear it, would call it a conversation with an imp. As a physician, I hear the simple human mind trying to ward off the crushing weight of silence. Her hands shake slightly as she sews. The magistrate would call it a tremor of guilt. I call it the natural decay of an aging body. Her sadness, her melancholia is not seen as a grief for a life that has passed her by. It is seen as a spiritual emptiness, a vacuum that the devil himself has rushed in to fill. Every symptom of her humanity is re-diagnosed as a symptom of her damnation. He pauses, and his gaze falls upon the cat, which is now winding itself around the old woman's legs, purring softly. A dark, cynical humor enters Weyer's voice. And then there is her only companion, the cat. In this age, my friend, a feline is not a pet. It is a familiar. It is a low-level demonic entity assigned to you for administrative support. Its purring is not a sound of contentment. It is the engine of hell warming up for the day's malevolent tasks. Its aloof, independent nature is not a quirk of the species. It is proof of its infernal allegiance. That it is black is merely a theatrical flourish on the devil's part. He allows himself a small, dry smile. My medical advice for poor Elsbeth. It is simple. She must get a dog. A dog is loyal, obedient, and generally considered too simple-minded to negotiate a complex demonic contract. They are, in the theological sense of this community, wonderfully and safely stupid. The humor fades as quickly as it came, replaced by the grim reality of her situation. Her loneliness makes her visible. Her poverty makes her a burden. Her age makes her strange. She is a loose thread in the tightly woven fabric of this village, and they will pull on it until the whole cloth of her life unravels. So what is the prescription for this woman? How does one treat the pathology of being different? He turns to you, his eyes holding no hope, only the cold, hard logic of survival. The treatment is a lifelong performance. If you are solitary by nature, you must force yourself into the clamor of the marketplace. Attend church and be sure to pray louder than your neighbors. If you are grieving, you must perform a conspicuous happiness. If you are old and your body fails you, you must hide your infirmities as if they were sins. Your survival depends upon presenting a perfect, unblemished, and utterly uninteresting facade to the world. You must become as plain and as predictable as a wooden spoon. For anything with a unique shape, anything that catches the light in an unusual way, is at risk of being hammered flat. The image of the lonely old woman and her demonic cat fades, and you are back in the deep, quiet stillness of Weyer's study. The lesson is over. And so he concludes, we have diagnosed the two great risk factors, competence and solitude. Being too good at what you do and having no one to speak for you. One makes you a threat, the other makes you a target. But what happens when these preventative measures fail? What is the course of treatment when the accusation is finally inevitably made? Ah, he says, his voice dropping low, that requires a different, more desperate kind of medicine. That requires us to enter the courtroom itself. The quiet of Dr. Weyer's study settles around you once more, a sanctuary of reason in a world besieged by fantasy. His first lesson on the mortal dangers of competence and solitude hangs in the air, a chilling diagnosis of the social ills that precede an accusation. Having explained the risk factors, he now prepares to guide you through the grim prognosis that follows when the disease of suspicion finally claims a victim. So he begins, his voice low and steady, a physician preparing a student for the grim realities of the ward. Our subject has failed to remain inconspicuous. She was too skilled, perhaps, or too lonely. The whispers have coalesced, the formal accusation has been made, and she has been taken from her home. Now begins the second, more intimate stage of her sickness. Now begins the therapy of the interrogation, where the soul is not saved, but systematically dismantled. He invites you to follow him once more into the cold, dark recesses of the town's memory. You leave his study and descend into a place of stone and shadow. The air grows cold and thick, heavy with the smell of damp earth, of mildew, and of the stale, sour scent of human fear. The only light comes from a single low-burning torch held in a wall sconce, its flames sputtering and casting monstrous dancing shadows. You are in a dungeon, a holding cell beneath the town hall. Here a man stands stripped to the waist, his skin pale and goose-pimpled in the chill. He is a farmer you might have seen in the market, his body thick with the honest muscle of a lifetime of labor. His hands are bound before him. He is not a monster. He is simply a man confused and terrified. Facing him is a local barber surgeon, a man who normally lances boils and sets broken bones, but who has now been given a more solemn and terrible duty. In his hand, he holds a long, slender, and wickedly sharp needle. Before they can interrogate the mind, Weyer's voice explains, a clinical whisper in the darkness. They must first find proof upon the body. They are searching for the sigillum diaboli, the devil's mark. You watch as the barber surgeon begins his work. He is searching for a physical sign of a spiritual contract, an irregularity on the skin that marks the subject as the devil's property. The theory. Weyer continues, his voice dripping with the contempt of a man of science, is that when a witch makes her pact, the devil marks her as his own, either with a claw, a tooth, or a hot iron. This mark, they believe, is insensible to pain and will not bleed when pricked. It is the seal upon the contract of her damnation. He lets out a dry, mirthless chuckle. As a physician, I can offer them a dozen mundane explanations for such a phenomenon. A callus on a farmer's hand from his plow. An old scar from a childhood fall where the nerves have been severed. A simple mole or birthmark which some people are simply born with. The body is a landscape of natural imperfections. But to these men, he says, as the barber surgeon prods a callus on the farmer's shoulder, every mole is a mountain of sin, every freckle a footprint of a demon. The farmer flinches as the needle pricks his skin. A tiny bead of blood wells up. The examiner moves on his expression, one of grim focus. He is not a sadist, you realize. He is something almost worse, a true believer. He is a man performing a holy duty. Now, Weyer whispers, witness the beautiful, inescapable logic of the test. If the needle finds a spot and the subject does not cry out, it is proof of the mark's infernal insensibility. The case is closed. But if the subject does cry out, as this poor man does with every prick, they are merely accused of being a cunning liar. The devil, you see, is lending them the strength to feign the pain of an ordinary mortal. It is a diagnostic test in which a negative result is simply further confirmation of the disease. It is a question to which only one answer is permitted. The needle continues its grim exploration. The farmer, now trembling, bites his lip, trying to remain stoic. Weyer shakes his head in the darkness. A fool. He thinks to prove his resilience, his manhood. He does not understand that he is not in a contest of endurance. He is in a theater, and he is forgetting his lines. He leans closer to you, his voice becoming a torrent of cynical, desperate advice, the prescription he would give if he were allowed to speak. So, what is the correct therapeutic response to this procedure? It is not stoic silence that is an admission of guilt. It is not defiant rage that is the devil's pride speaking. No. The only hope of survival lies in a carefully modulated performance of pious agony. You must cry out, he insists, but not with anger. Your cry must be that of a wounded soul, not a wounded body. You must call upon Jesus to witness your suffering. You must beseech the Virgin Mary for strength. You must accuse the devil loudly and with tears of bringing this torment upon you, of trying to frame you a faithful Christian. You must in essence agree with their entire worldview while loudly proclaiming your innocence within it. You must scream their script back at them, but with more feeling. You must, in short, outperform the inquisitor in his own play. The barber surgeon, growing frustrated, finally finds what he is looking for, a small pale patch of skin on the farmer's back, an old burn scar perhaps. He drives the needle in. The farmer, exhausted and terrified, barely reacts. A thin trickle of lymph, but no blood emerges. The examiner steps back, his face alight with triumphant discovery. Aha, he declares to the empty, damp air. The mark. The farmer is led away, his fate now sealed by a single meaningless pinprick on his back. The physical examination is complete. The body has confessed its guilt. And so Weyer concludes, his voice heavy with the grief of a physician watching his art be perverted into a tool of destruction. The body, which should be a source of empirical truth, has been made to tell a lie. The tools of diagnosis have become the instruments of damnation. The physical evidence has been secured. Now, he says, as the scene of the cold dungeon fades around you, they will move on to the mind. And the questions they will ask are even sharper and far more insidious than their needles. The sound of the heavy dungeon door slamming shut echoes in your mind, a sound of grim finality. The farmer's body has by their twisted logic already confessed. You feel the scene around you dissolve, the damp chill of the dungeon replaced by a different kind of cold, the dry intellectual cold of an interrogation chamber. You are with Weyer in a small, severe room. A high, narrow window allows a single stark shaft of light to cut through the gloom, illuminating the chair where the accused now sits. It is the same farmer, but he seems smaller now, diminished by fear and the certainty of his accusers. Facing him across a heavy oak table is the inquisitor. He is not a man who shouts. His voice is calm, measured, and utterly devoid of doubt. He is a scholar of sin, a logician of damnation, and his certainty is his most potent weapon. Beside him, a clerk sits with a quill poised over a fresh sheet of parchment, ready to transcribe the truth, not the truth of what happened, but the truth they have come here to create. The body has been diagnosed. Weyer's voice murmurs beside you a clinical commentary on the unfolding procedure. Now they will move on to the mind. They believe the devil has taken up residence in this poor man's soul, and they see themselves as physicians attempting to drive it out. But their methods are not of healing. They are of demolition. They will not cleanse the sanctuary of his mind. They will tear it down stone by stone until they can build a cathedral to their own conclusions upon its ruins. The inquisitor leans forward, folding his hands on the table. His expression is one of patient paternal concern. It is the most terrifying thing in the room. "Tell us, my son." He begins, his voice soft and reasonable. "When was the last time the devil came to you in the night?" Weyer draws a sharp, quiet breath beside you, and there it is. He whispers a hint of grudging admiration in his voice, a masterclass in theological entrapment. Listen to it. The question is not if he came, but when. Guilt is the premise, not the potential conclusion. The interrogation begins at the sentencing phase. They are merely negotiating the details of the crime now. The farmer, confused, shakes his head. I have never seen the devil, Your Eminence. I am a God-fearing man." The inquisitor smiles a thin, sad smile of profound disappointment. He is a great liar, is he not, the father of lies? He whispers in your ear, even now telling you to deny him, to cling to your pride. Do not listen to that voice, my son. We are here to help you save your immortal soul. You must only help us by telling the truth. So I ask again, what form did he take when he begged you sign his book? You see the trap, Weyer murmurs. Denial is not seen as a statement of fact. It is seen as proof of the devil's insidious influence. To resist the narrative is to confirm it. The farmer believes he is in an argument he can win with honesty. He does not yet understand that this is not an argument at all. It is a diagnosis, and the doctor has already decided on the disease. The farmer continues to protest, his voice growing frantic. His pleas for reason for belief in his good name fall like dead leaves into the profound silence of the chamber. The inquisitor's patience, you can see, is beginning to wear thin. The amateur Weyer whispers to you with a sigh, believes this is a battle of wills. He is mistaken. The only therapeutic course of action now is not to fight the diagnosis, but to haggle over the symptoms. This is where a truly skilled patient can sometimes find a sliver of hope. A dark, sharp wit, born from witnessing endless tragedy, enters his voice. My prescription were this poor man, my charge he must confess. But he must confess to being a terrible witch. He must construct a narrative that makes him seem less like a formidable servant of darkness and more like a bumbling demonic intern who consistently fails at his infernal tasks. He begins to outline this desperate, absurd strategy, his voice a low, conspiratorial hum. When they ask, "Did you fly to the Sabbat on a broomstick?" you must not deny it. You must say, "Yes, Your Eminence, but I confess I am terribly afraid of heights, and only made it as far as my neighbor's roof before I became dizzy and fell into his rain barrel." When they ask, "Did you cast a blight upon his crops?" you must say, "I tried, Your Eminence, with all my might, but I believe I used the wrong incantation, as his pumpkins grew to a most prodigious and prize-winning size the next morning." When they ask, "Did you dance with demons?" you must answer, "Yes, but they have a dreadful sense of rhythm. I kept stepping on their hooves, and one of them, a rather sulky imp named Rustle, accused me of ruining the entire diabolical cotillion." You must make your evil so pathetic, so unimpressive, that you seem more of a nuisance to hell than a threat to Christendom. Sometimes, my friend, ridicule can be a more effective shield than righteousness. He shakes his head, the brief flash of humor fading back into sorrow. But this poor man knows none of these rules. He has only his honesty, and here honesty is a fatal condition. The farmer, broken by the circular logic and the inquisitor's unshakable certainty, is finally reduced to sobs. The inquisitor sees his opening. His voice becomes soft again, coaxing like a man calming a frightened animal. "Tell us his name, son, the name of your dark master." Tell us, and your suffering may yet be eased. Weyer sighs. And now comes the final act of the play. They will feed him the lines. They have heard the confessions of others. They know the stories. They will ask, was it Azazel? Was it Beelzebub? They will offer him a list of names to choose from, like a merchant offering different shades of cloth. Eventually, exhausted and broken, he will seize upon one, and that will be his truth. The great lurid confessions you read in the pamphlets, the flying, the feasting, the kissing of the devil's posterior, they are not born from the memories of the accused. They are a catechism of horror, a shared script whispered from inquisitor to victim from one trial to the next, piece by painful piece, until the voice of the person in this chair is merely an echo of his tormentor's imagination. The farmer is finally dragged from the room to be persuaded further. The inquisitor and his clerk remain. The clerk dips his quill in the ink pot. The inquisitor dictates his voice calm and clear. The subject, being stubborn in his denials and clearly in the grip of the evil one, was removed for a period of therapeutic reflection. They will get their confession. Weyer says, his voice a flat, dead thing. The patient will always eventually admit to the disease. The only question left is how much therapy will be required to elicit the truth. He turns to you, his eyes grim. And that therapy, my time-traveling friend, is our next and most difficult lesson. The interrogation chamber, with its oppressive silence and its insidious questions, fades from your mind's eye. The farmer, broken in spirit but not yet in body, has been led away. You remain with Weyer in the abstract darkness of his study, the air thick with the memory of the lies that were demanded and the truths that were ignored. The mind has proven stubborn, Weyer says, his voice a low, grim diagnosis. The patient refuses to admit to the disease. When verbal persuasion fails, the physician of the soul must therefore turn to a more direct, more physical form of therapy. They must now attempt to reason with the flesh. He invites you to descend with him down a narrow, winding flight of stone steps, leaving the world of even-skewed logic behind. The air grows colder with each step, and a damp mineral scent rises to meet you, the smell of wet stone, of rust, and of something older, the faint metallic tang of old fear. You arrive at a heavy oak door bound with iron straps. The sound of it groaning open is a sound of pure, dreadful finality. You step through into the torture chamber. Do not picture a place of frantic screams and chaotic violence. That is a fantasy for the simple-minded. The reality is far colder and far more terrible. It is a place of quiet, methodical work. It is a laboratory. The room is small, vaulted, and windowless. The torchlight flickers, seeming to be devoured by the sweating stone walls. Your attention is immediately drawn to the objects that occupy the space. They are not instruments of rage, but of engineering. They are machines. Weyer, your guide, does not look at them with horror, but with the cold, analytical eye of a physician examining a set of flawed and grotesque surgical tools. Here, he says, his voice a flat, clinical tone that cuts through the chilling air, is the next stage of the treatment. They call this putting the question to the accused, a most elegant euphemism. But you must understand, these devices are not designed to ask a question. They are designed to create a pain so absolute that the only possible answer to any question is yes. He gestures toward a long, low wooden frame with rollers at each end. The rack, a fascinating study in levers and pulleys, he observes as if admiring a piece of craftsmanship. Its purpose is dislocation, not just of the limbs, but of the will itself. It introduces the body to a geometry it was never meant to comprehend. The mind, in its attempt to escape this impossible geometry, will agree to anything. It will confess to flying, to dancing with demons, to souring the moon's milk. His gaze travels to a smaller, more intricate device on a nearby table, a set of iron clamps with screws, the thumb screws. A more intimate approach, he notes, an exercise in applied pressure. It focuses the entire universe of pain into a single small point. It is a remarkably effective tool for persuading a person that their memory of events may have been incomplete. He pauses, allowing you to absorb the cold mechanical reality of the room. The instruments sit there, silent and patient, waiting. They have no malice. They are merely tools waiting for a hand to guide them in their work. And their work is not to find truth, but to manufacture it. The great theological and legal question of our age, Weyer continues, his voice dripping with an irony so bitter it could curdle milk, is whether a confession extracted under these conditions is valid. The learned men of the Church have debated this for centuries. They have arrived at a most ingenious solution. A confession made during torture, he explains, is of course not considered valid. It is made under duress. However, if the subject is removed from the instrument of torture and then in a calmer moment repeats the confession, that second confession is considered voluntary and true. It is a masterful piece of legal fiction. They break the body in this room and then record its echo in another. It allows them to maintain the illusion of justice while practicing the reality of coercion. As a physician, he cannot help but analyze the core flaw in their method. A body in agony is not a reliable witness. It is a desperate animal, and it will chew off its own leg to escape the trap. The mind under the influence of absolute pain untethers itself from reality. It will create visions. It will invent memories. It will offer up the names of neighbors of friends of its own mother, if it believes that is what the inquisitor wants to hear. Pain is a terrible and potent poison, and a confession given under its influence is not a testimony. It is a symptom of the poisoning. He turns to you, his eyes dark with the weight of this knowledge. The poor soul who is brought here believes they have a choice. It is a choice between two paths: endure the pain and maintain their innocence, or confess to a lie and find release. But this is the greatest illusion of all. There is no choice. The inquisitor has all the time in the world. The victim does not. The outcome of this therapy is not in doubt. Only the duration of the suffering is in question. So, what is my prescription in this dreadful therapeutic session? He asks, his voice now a low, urgent whisper. What advice would I give to the poor soul strapped to that table? It is simple, it is terrible, and it is the only advice that matters. Confess. Confess immediately. Do not try to be a saint. Do not try to be a martyr. The saints in the stories are remembered because they died for their faith. Your goal is different. Your goal is to see tomorrow's sunrise. Truth died in the interrogation room. All that is left to save now is your own flesh. The inquisitors are not interested in your story. They are interested in their story coming from your mouth. So give it to them. Give it to them before the first screw is turned. A dark, bleakly humorous thought occurs to him, a final cynical piece of advice for this impossible situation. You must understand, he says, there is no safe word in this chamber. The safe word is and has always been, I confess. Use it. Use it liberally. Use it before they have even finished asking the first question. It saves everyone a great deal of unpleasantness and a considerable amount of strain on the equipment. The grim jest hangs in the cold, still air. This is the heart of the lesson in a system designed to produce only one outcome. Resistance is not noble. It is merely a prolonging of the inevitable. They will get their confession in the end, Weyer says, his voice returning to a somber, reflective tone. The patient will always eventually admit to the disease. The only variable is how much therapy will be required to elicit the truth they came here to find. He gestures to the doorway, inviting you to leave this cold clinical room of despair. But sometimes he adds, his voice low and grim, setting the stage for the next lesson. For a truly stubborn case, or for a bit of public theater, they employ a different sort of diagnostic tool. One that requires no machine of iron and wood, but simply the pure judgment of an element. Our next lesson takes us from this chamber to the riverbank for a lecture on divine physics. The grim, methodical silence of the torture chamber dissolves, and you find yourself once again in the open air. But there is no relief here. The air is not fresh, it is thick with the tension of a public spectacle. Dr. Weyer has led you from the private therapy of the dungeon to a public demonstration of divine will. You are standing on a riverbank, part of a crowd that has gathered to witness an ordeal. The setting is cruelly picturesque. The river flows lazily, its surface glittering in the afternoon sun. The trees on the far bank are a lush, vibrant green. It is a scene of natural peace, one that is about to be desecrated by an act of profound, unnatural cruelty. In the center of the clearing stands the accused. This time, a young woman, her face pale with a terror so absolute, it seems to have frozen her features into a mask. Her hands and feet are bound with coarse rope. A priest stands beside her, his hand raised in a blessing, his voice a sanctimonious drone that is carried away by the breeze. But sometimes Weyer's voice murmurs beside you, continuing his grim lecture. A confession is not forthcoming even after vigorous persuasion. Or perhaps the accused is too important, and a more public, more definitive proof is required. In such cases, they turn from the inventions of man to what they believe is the judgment of God himself. They employ a diagnostic tool that requires no machine of iron and wood, but simply the pure judgment of an element. Welcome, my friend, to a lesson in divine physics. He gestures to the priest. That man is now explaining the beautiful simple theology of the trial by water. He tells the crowd that water, being the holy element of baptism, is pure. It will therefore physically reject anything unholy that enters it. The logic follows as clean and clear as the water itself. If this woman is a witch, a creature in league with the devil, the river will refuse to accept her. She will float. If, however, she is innocent and pure of heart, the holy water will embrace her as one of its own. She will sink. He pauses, letting the perfect, insane logic of the proposition settle in the air. A beautiful theory, he says, his voice laced with the deepest sarcasm you have yet heard from him. It possesses poetry. It possesses drama. It has only one minor, insignificant flaw. It is utter and complete nonsense, a flagrant denial of the very physical laws that God himself used to construct the world. As a physician, a man who has studied the human body, he cannot contain his intellectual contempt. He speaks of holiness. I speak of the air trapped in a woman's lungs. He speaks of damnation. I speak of the density of human bone and the buoyancy of a woolen dress which can hold air like a bladder. Whether this poor creature floats or sinks is a simple matter of physics. But here on this riverbank, physics is a forgotten heresy, and the only science that matters is the science of superstition. The priest finishes his blessing. The crowd falls silent. The bound woman is led to the edge of a small wooden dock. The executioners for that is what they are take hold of her. And now Weyer whispers, you will witness the most fascinating theological and logistical paradox of our time. Observe the elegant construction of this test. It is a game in which the house can never lose. If she floats, he explains his tone, cold and precise, her guilt is proven. She will be pulled from the water alive and taken to be burned at the stake, her soul already damned. If she sinks, he continues, the water has embraced her. Her innocence is declared to all. She is pure. She is, however, also at the bottom of a river with her lungs full of water. She has in all likelihood drowned. It is the ultimate win-win for the prosecution. They are either praised for successfully identifying and executing a witch, or they are praised for tragically but correctly exonerating an innocent. The opinion of the accused on the matter becomes, shall we say, waterlogged and entirely irrelevant. The woman is now at the edge of the dock, her eyes wide with terror. She looks at the water, then at the silent, watching faces of her neighbors. She is trapped between two kinds of death. So Weyer poses the final terrible question. What is my medical prognosis for a patient facing this particular diagnostic procedure? What is my prescription for survival? He turns to you, his face a mask of weary disgust. My advice is this. He says, his voice a low, bitter whisper. Exhale. Let all the air from your body before they cast you in. Pray that your woolen skirt is heavy and sodden. Pray that you sink like a stone. It is your only path to being declared innocent. A posthumous victory, to be sure, and one that offers precious little comfort to your corpse, but a victory in the eyes of God and the law nonetheless. In this world, sometimes the only way to save your good name is to sacrifice your life. The executioners swing the woman out over the water. For a moment, she hangs suspended between the sky and the river, a pendulum marking a moment of absolute madness. Then they let her go. There is a splash. The crowd leans forward as one, their eyes fixed on the ripples spreading across the surface of the water. They are waiting for their sign. They are waiting for God to tell them what they already believe. Weyer turns away. They are not looking for a sign from God. He concludes, his voice filled with a profound emptiness. They are looking for a justification. They have turned their rivers into instruments of murder, and they have called it a sacrament. The diagnosis is complete. The ripples on the river's surface fade from your mind, and the damp chill of the riverbank recedes. The terrible judgment of the water is complete. Whether by floating to the pyre or sinking to an innocent grave, the accused has been proven guilty in the eyes of the community. You are back in the quiet solitude of Dr. Weyer's study, the air thick with the scent of old knowledge and unspoken sorrow. So he says, his voice a low academic murmur breaking the silence. The body has been tested. The flesh has been found wanting. Guilt has been established by means of rack or river. Now comes the final flourish, the capstone on this monument of absurdity. Now they must have the full confession. He explains that this last confession is no longer for the purpose of proving guilt, that matter is already settled. This is for the public record. It is for the pamphlets that will be printed and sold at the market. It is a cautionary tale, a piece of religious theater, and its script must be spectacular. Let us leave the physical world behind for a moment, he invites you, his voice becoming your guide into a more fantastical landscape. Let us examine the testimony itself. Let us dissect the anatomy of the confession. It almost always begins in the same way, with a flight. He gestures, and you can almost see the scene he describes taking shape in the candlelight. A lonely woman in her lightless hovel. A desire for escape, for something more than the crushing drudgery of her life. The confession will state, he narrates, his tone like that of a storyteller recounting a well-known fable, that the witch preparing for the great Sabbath will disrobe. She will then take a special ointment from a hidden pot, a foul-smelling unguent, and anoint her skin, or perhaps the length of a common broomstick. She will feel a dizzying, weightless sensation. The hovel around her will seem to twist and distort. And then, with a great rushing feeling, she will soar up through the chimney and out into the cold night sky, the moon her only companion. The image is potent, a vision of dark, exhilarating freedom. He paints a picture of her flying over sleeping villages and silent moon-drenched forests, the wind whipping at her hair, her destination a distant mountain peak, the Blocksberg, the Brocken, where the great gathering of her dark lord awaits. A compelling narrative, Weyer says, and the storyteller's tone vanishes, replaced by the dry, clinical precision of the physician. It has drama, it has magic, it has a pleasing symmetrical inversion of the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin. It is, however, a complete and utter fiction born of chemistry and despair. He reaches for a medical text on his desk, its pages filled with detailed drawings of plants. This flying ointment they confess to using, he says, is not a magical substance. But it is, I concede, a potent one. I have studied the recipes pieced together from the fevered ramblings of the accused. The ingredients are consistent. Atropa belladonna, the deadly nightshade. Hyoscyamus niger, or henbane. Mandragora officinarum, the mandrake root. These are not the components of a spell. They are the components of a powerful poison, a psychoactive deliriant. He explains the medicine of it with a weary patience. When mixed with fat and absorbed through the skin, these plants induce a profound trance. They cause a racing of the heart, a sensation of vertigo and weightlessness. They produce vivid, terrifying, and often erotic hallucinations. The feeling of flying is a common and well-documented side effect of this particular class of poison. The woman is not soaring over the forest. She is lying on the cold dirt floor of her own home, her pulse thundering in her ears, her mind entirely untethered from her body. She is flying through the far more terrifying landscape of her own poisoned consciousness. The tragedy of it settles upon you heavy and profound. These women, perhaps seeking a momentary escape from the brutal reality of their lives through folk remedies or half-understood herbalism, were merely describing a dream, a drug-induced hallucination. She wakes from this stupor hours later. Weyer continues, her body aching, her mind filled with the disjointed, terrifying memory of a nightmare. And into this confusion steps the inquisitor, his notebook open, his questions ready. "Did you fly?" he asks. And she, remembering the sensation of weightlessness, says yes. "Did you see the devil?" he asks. and she, remembering the dark horned shapes that haunt the edges of a belladonna dream, says, yes. He does not record that she was poisoned. He records that she has flown. A flicker of that dark academic humor returns to his eyes. It is a profound failure of diagnostics, he says with a shake of his head. The inquisitors in their infinite wisdom cannot distinguish between an astral projection and a severe neurological reaction to a poorly dosed poultice. They meticulously record tales of soaring towards the Devil's Mountain when the subject has merely soared to the far side of their own cot and back. The flight is very real. It is the landscape that has been tragically misunderstood. He falls silent for a moment, contemplating the deep human desire for flight for escape, and how cruelly it has been twisted into a proof of damnation. So our witch has flown, he concludes, his voice soft and low. She has left her body behind and traveled through the night on the wings of a poisoned dream. But where has she gone? She has gone to the great festival, the Black Mass, the banquet at the heart of darkness. He looks at you, his expression grim, preparing you for the next and even more lurid part of the tale. Our next lesson, he says, concerns the catering and entertainment at the Devil's Sabbat. The dizzying, hallucinatory image of a flight through the night sky fades, leaving you once more in the quiet, scholarly atmosphere of Dr. Weyer's study. He has explained the journey. Now he will describe the destination. He gestures for you to follow him deeper into the anatomy of the coerced confession to the grand lurid festival that awaits the witch at the end of her flight. So our patient has flown, he says, his voice a low clinical murmur. She has traveled through the night on the wings of a poisoned dream. But where has she landed? She has landed at the Sabbat, the Black Mass, a diabolical gathering that, according to the books of my learned colleagues, is a perfect blasphemous inversion of all that is holy. It is, they would have you believe, a banquet at the heart of darkness. Again he invites you into the confessed memory, a landscape painted with fear and fantasy. You find yourself in a clearing deep within a dark ancient forest. The moon is hidden. The only light comes from a great roaring bonfire in the center, its flames casting a flickering greenish unnatural light on the scene. The sound is a cacophony, a discordant shrill music played on pipes that seem to be carved from human bone, and the wild frantic laughter of the other attendees. The first part of the ritual, Weyer narrates his voice, a calm guide through the chaos, is the dance. They confess to a wild, energetic, circular dance around the fire. They describe a feeling of ecstatic abandon of their bodies moving with a strength and speed they did not know they possessed. They spin and leap, their movements becoming more and more frantic until they collapse in exhaustion. He pauses, allowing the image of the frenzied dance to form in your mind before he calmly dissects it with his physician's logic. As a doctor, I do not see a dance. I see the well-known effects of henbane and belladonna poisoning. The convulsions, the muscle spasms, the frantic, uncontrolled energy. The body is not dancing with joy. It is writhing against a chemical assault. The ecstasy they feel is the mind's desperate attempt to make sense of the body's revolt. Next, he turns his attention to the centerpiece of the evening, and after the dance comes the feast. They confess that the devil provides a great banquet to reward his followers. Great platters of roasted meats, overflowing jugs of dark wine, exotic fruits piled high on mossy stones. It is a vision of tempting earthly abundance. But he continues, and a sharp diagnostic curiosity enters his tone when pressed for details. A curious inconsistency emerges. The meat, they often confess, is tough and tasteless, like ash or dry leather. The wine is bitter and cold. The beautiful fruit turns to dust in their mouths. This, my friend, is a classic feature of a powerful hallucination. The mind can conjure a perfect image of a feast, for it has seen many, but it cannot replicate the true sensory experience of taste and satisfaction. The phantom banquet is always a deep and profound disappointment. The devil, it seems, is a terrible host. The most crucial part of the confession is the personal encounter with the master of ceremonies himself. Weyer describes how the accused is brought before the devil, who often appears not as a great red monster, but as a handsome man dressed in black, or as a great horned goat who stands upon its hind legs. And here Weyer explains, the pact is sealed. They confess to signing his great book in their own blood. They confess to the osculum in fame the kiss of shame upon his hindquarters. These are the lurid, shocking details that the inquisitors crave, the ones that will be read with wide-eyed horror by the good people in the town square. But again, let us apply a physician's eye. The devil they describe is always a creature of cold. His flesh, they say, is like ice. His breath is stale and chilling. His touch is without warmth. Are these truly the signs of a supernatural being, a lord of fire and passion? Or are they perhaps the symptoms of a body in distress? The known effects of these poisons include a severe disruption of the circulatory system, a sensation of coldness in the extremities, and a neurological deadening of the sense of touch. They are not kissing a demon. They are describing the clinical symptoms of their own poisoning. The lurid, fantastical scene begins to fade, and Weyer's voice brings you back to the cold, hard reality of how these stories are born. You must ask yourself, he says, his voice now filled with a weary frustration. How is it that an unlettered peasant woman in a German village and a lonely widow in a French town who have never met, who cannot read, describe the exact same infernal rituals down to the last detail? It is not because they attended the same diabolical party. It is because they have been interrogated by men who have all read the same books. This confession is not a memory being recalled. It is a script being performed. The inquisitor is the director holding the prompt book, often the Malleus Maleficarum itself, with its detailed obsessive chapters on the specific mechanics of the Sabbat. The terrified victim is the actor fed her lines through hours of leading questions, of threats, and of the therapeutic reflection we have already discussed. Did you fly? Did you dance? Did you kiss the book? The questions are the script, and a no is simply a refusal to play one's part, a refusal that will be corrected with more persuasion. He leans forward, his expression a mask of grim, final understanding, delivering the most cynical truth of all. And for this harrowing performance, he says, his voice laced with ice, for this one-woman show, in which the actor is also the author of her own damnation, she receives not a curtain call, but a bonfire. It is by all accounts a terrible contract. The lesson is over. The great fantastical lie has been dissected and exposed for what it is, a fever dream written by fanatics and signed in pain. And so Weyer concludes, his voice softening, preparing to lead you from this dark theater of the mind. The story is complete. The confession is secured. The authorities now have their justification written in the victim's own hand, even if the ink was mixed with tears and terror. All that remains, he says, his voice growing heavy, is the final act of purification. The public spectacle, the bonfire. He invites you to witness this last great spectacle. You travel with him in your mind to the town square. It is a day of grim festival. The air, which should smell of baking bread and commerce, is instead thick with the scent of sawdust, of nervous sweat, and of a strange, almost electric anticipation. The square is packed. People hang from the windows of the half-timbered houses that lean over the square, their faces a sea of morbid curiosity. At the center of it all stands the pyre. It is not merely a pile of wood. It has been constructed with a kind of liturgical care. It is a crude altar built for a human sacrifice. The condemned woman is led through the crowd. Her confession has been read aloud, a lurid tale to titillate and terrify the populace. They jeer at her, they spit, they throw refuse. They are not attacking a neighbor. They are attacking a monster from a story, a character whose villainy has now been officially sanctioned. Behold, Weyer whispers to you as the woman is tied to the stake, the grandest theater of all. They do not see this as a murder. They see it as a form of civic medicine, a necessary and righteous surgery on the body politic. They believe this town is sick with a spiritual cancer, and that by burning this one infected member, they can restore the whole community to health and to God's grace. The priest raises his cross, the torch is lit. As the flames begin to lick at the dry wood, a great collective sigh seems to pass through the crowd. It is a sigh of relief. Listen to them, Weyer urges. They are not burning a woman. They are burning their own fear. For months, they have lived with a nameless dread fear of a failed harvest, of a sick child, of their own damnation. It is a heavy, invisible burden. But now that fear has been given a face and a name, it has been put on trial and found guilty. And now they get to watch it be consumed by fire. They are throwing all their anxieties, all their hardships, all their secret sins onto that pyre, and watching them turn to smoke and ash. For a few brief hours, the fire makes them feel clean. It makes them feel powerful. It makes them feel pure. You do not watch the flames consume the woman. Weyer directs your gaze away back to the faces in the crowd. You see the light of the fire dancing in their wide, mesmerized eyes. You see their expressions of rapt, holy terror. This is not justice. This is an exorcism where the entire town is the patient, and an innocent woman's agony is the price of their fleeting peace of mind. The fire dies down. The crowd, purged and exhausted, begins to disperse. They will go home to their dinners, their consciences clear, their faith affirmed. They will sleep soundly tonight, warmed by the memory of the blaze. You return with Weyer to the deep, welcome silence of his study. The church bell tolls for the end of the day, each note a mournful echo of the life that has just been extinguished. He stands for a long time before his cluttered desk, the tools of his own rational trade. His charts, his scalpels, his books, all seeming like foolish toys in the face of the inferno you have just witnessed. He looks at you, his invisible companion, and the mask of the cynical academic guide finally falls away, revealing the weary, wounded man beneath. And so he says, his voice cracking with a sorrow he no longer tries to conceal, "The lessons are over. My survival guide is complete. But did you truly believe my rules could save you, that a well-timed swoon or a cleverly worded confession could grant you passage through this maelstrom of madness?" He shakes his head, a gesture of profound self-reproach. "No, my lessons were a fiction, a physician's desperate attempt to classify the symptoms of a disease for which there is no cure. I tried to apply order to chaos. I tried to fight this plague with reason, with anatomy, with logic. I stood on the shore and tried to lecture a hurricane. It was a fool's errand. You cannot reason with a nightmare, especially when the dreamer does not wish to wake up. This fever does not burn out. It must consume everything until there is nothing left but ashes and a terrible quiet shame." He sinks into his chair, the weight of a lifetime of failed arguments settling upon him. "I have spent my life writing books to prove that these women are not witches, but are sick in mind or in body. I have presented my evidence to princes and to bishops. I have shown them the simple medical truths behind their supposed demonic marks. And they have listened politely, and then they have gone on building their bonfires. Because the fire is a better story. It is more dramatic. It is more satisfying. And my sad, complicated truths are a cold comfort compared to the warmth of a simple, all-consuming lie." He picks up a quill from his desk, weighing it in his hand. "My intellect," he says softly, "my reason. The very things I thought were my strongest weapons. They were utterly useless. In the end, I was no different from you. A silent witness, a helpless observer, a ghost at the bonfire." He looks up, and a final fleeting glimpse of his dark, cynical wit returns a last spark before the embers die. "So after all my learned advice, what is my final prescription? My one true piece of medical guidance for surviving the burning times?" He allows himself a small, bitter smile. "It is this: invent a device that can travel through the corridors of time, perfect it, refine it, and then aim it for an age with better science, a stronger appreciation for doubt, and considerably less flammable outerwear." Failing that, he adds, his voice becoming a whisper, "Simply try not to be born a woman, or old, or poor, or too intelligent. It simplifies the diagnosis greatly." He sets the quill down. His lecture is over. "But you," he says, and his voice is now a gentle fading sound, a release. "You are from such a time. You can leave this age of shadows. You do not have to live here. So go now. Rest. Sleep is a mercy this era rarely affords. It is a sanctuary that no inquisitor can breach. It is the only cure that truly works." His form begins to dissolve, the candlelight flickering and fading with him. The study, the books, the heavy scent of herbs and old paper, all of it recedes, leaving you in a profound and peaceful darkness, the echo of his voice a final comforting guide. Final.